Alright, Eagles fans, buckle up, because Philly just made a sneaky little move that could end up being a lot bigger than it looks on paper. The Eagles have reacquired offensive tackle Fred Johnson from the Jacksonville Jaguars in exchange for a 2026 7th-round draft pick. Now at first glance, you might be thinking, really? We're talking about a backup swing tackle here? But if you know the Eagles, you know their success has always started in the trenches. The offensive line is the heartbeat of this team. So let's dive in, because this move actually tells us a lot about where the Eagles are right now, what they value, and what could be coming next. Let's start with Fred Johnson himself. At 28 years old, Johnson isn't a superstar, but he's one of those guys who grinds it out, stays ready, and when his number is called, he delivers. Quick refresher. Johnson went undrafted in 2019 but bounced around a bit before carving out a niche as a reliable depth tackle. Last season with Philly, he started 6 games. The Eagles went 5-1 in those starts. That's not a coincidence. He held down the fort whenever injuries popped up, especially when Lane Johnson or Jordan Mailata weren't 100%. Think about that. If Johnson hadn't stepped in, how different could the Eagles' season have looked? Maybe one of those close wins flips the other way. Maybe their playoff seeding changes. Sometimes the unsung guys have a bigger impact than we realize. Eagles fans, do you remember that Week 7 game last season when Johnson filled in and the run game looked unstoppable? Drop your favorite underrated O-lineman in the comments. I love hearing about the guys who never get enough credit. So why bring Johnson back? A couple of reasons. First, depth. Offensive line depth is like insurance. You hope you don't need it, but when you do, it can save your season. Philly's backups this preseason, guys like Kendall Lamb and some of the younger linemen, haven't exactly been inspiring. Confidence. Second, familiarity. Johnson already knows Jeff Stoutland's system, the terminology, the blocking schemes. Offensive line chemistry is everything. You can have 5 individually great linemen, but if they don't gel, it's chaos. Johnson slides right back in without missing a beat. Third, low risk, high reward. A 7th-round pick? That's basically a lottery ticket. The odds of that player making the roster are slim. Trading that for a proven, plug-and-play lineman? That's classic Howie Roseman. The man is a master at squeezing value out of late-round assets. Here's a question for you guys. Do you think late-round picks are overrated? Would you rather have a flyer in the 7th, or a proven veteran like Johnson? Let me know what you'd do if you were GM. The Eagles' O-line legacy. To really understand this move, you have to appreciate Philly's history with offensive linemen. The Eagles have consistently invested in the trenches, and it's a big part of why they've been competitive for so long. From legends like Jason Peters to the current stars Lane Johnson and Jason Kelce, who, let's be real, might go down as the greatest center of all time, this franchise knows that controlling the line of scrimmage controls the game. Fred Johnson might not be a household name, but he's part of that tradition. He represents stability. And that's the Eagles' philosophy: build depth, prepare for injuries, and never leave yourself exposed in the trenches. Fun fact, did you know in the Super Bowl season, the Eagles used 10 different O-line combinations throughout the year? And they still dominated. That's the power of depth in coaching. Comparisons to other trades. This move also fits into a bigger picture. Around the league, we're seeing similar low-cost, high-reward trades. Just look at how the 49ers and Chiefs, 2 of Philly's biggest rivals, constantly bring back former players they trust. It's like keeping a tool in your garage that you know always works. Even if you don't need it today, you'll be glad it's there when something breaks. And it's not just Fred Johnson. Philly also moved Darian Kinnard to the Packers for a 6th-rounder and picked up Sam Howell from the Vikings. Clearly, the front office is tweaking the roster, making sure they're covered at every position before final cuts. Howie Roseman isn't making splashy trades here, he's doing chess moves. He's shoring up weak spots, balancing depth, and keeping veterans he trusts in the building. Speculation, what could this mean? Here's where it gets fun. What could this trade actually mean for the season? Insurance for Lane Johnson. Lane is still elite, but he's 35 and has battled injuries. If he misses time, Fred Johnson becomes critical. Flexibility in roster cuts. This might mean one of the young tackles is on the bubble. Do the Eagles keep an extra veteran and cut a rookie project? Playoff planning. The Eagles know they're a contender. Depth isn't about week 1, it's about January. A single injury in the playoffs can wreck a Super Bowl run. Remember the Chiefs' O-line disaster in the Super Bowl against the Bucs? Philly's trying to avoid that. And here's a fun hypothetical. What if Fred Johnson ends up starting meaningful playoff games? Imagine the storyline. A guy traded for a 7th-round pick ends up protecting Jalen Hurts' blind side in the NFC Championship. It sounds wild, but football is full of those stories. What do you think, Eagles Nation? Could Fred Johnson actually end up being the difference between a deep playoff run and an early exit? Too dramatic, or a real possibility? Drop your predictions in the chat. Big picture takeaway. At the end of the day, this move might not make headlines like a star quarterback trade, but it's the kind of smart, calculated decision that championship teams make. Fred Johnson is more than just a depth piece. He's a reminder of how the Eagles operate. Prepare for every scenario, invest in the trenches, and never overlook the guys who keep your quarterback upright. So while the rest of the league shrugs at this trade, Eagles fans should be paying attention. Because sometimes, the quietest moves end up being the loudest come playoff time. And with Philly's history, don't be surprised if we look back months from now and say, wow, bringing Fred Johnson back was one of the most underrated moves of the year. Alright guys, that's the breakdown. What do you think? Was this just a depth move, or could it actually shape the Eagles' season? Let me know in the comments. Hit that like button if you're hyped for the season. And subscribe because we'll be covering every twist and turn as this Eagles team makes another run. Fly Eagles fly!